I'm so glad to be chatting with you about this. Can you just share with us your journey of health before we started working together?
Oh, okay. Um, how long do we have? So I've had digestive and stomach issues pretty much my whole life, but it got a lot worse sometime in my late 20s, early 30s, and kind of kept progressively getting worse. My diet was getting more and more restricted. I think you called it the chicken and rice diet.
The
It's
what? Chicken and
the
rice.
chicken and rice diet. That's pretty much all I was eating. And so, yeah, I was just feeling kind of low energy a lot of the time.
And gut symptoms?
Yeah, so I had a lot of bloating, discomfort, urgency. Yeah.
And I assume you had been to quite a few GI doctors.
Yep. So probably most of my life as I've had all my symptoms and problems. Yeah, a lot of doctors in my life talking about anxiety and depression symptoms that was probably the cause, they thought, but not a lot of investigation into it. I had seen a GI doctor after I started FODMAP. My primary care was the actual one that recommended the FODMAP. But after I started FODMAP, I started having acid reflux. And so I did see a GI for that. And kind of no matter what doctor I saw, it was kind of like, well, you have IBS. I'm sorry. That sucks. Here's the list of foods that you can never eat again. Yeah.
Yeah. And then didn't they? And then eventually, let's see, you tested positive for H. pylori, right? Treated for that.
Hmm.
And then they removed your gallbladder, right? You had gallstones.
Yeah. So getting the diagnosis of H. pylori took a long time too. I was probably had it for definitely over a decade, they thought, and went through a long course of antibiotics to treat the H. pylori. I got a little bit better, but then a few months later, I was back to being really, really sick. And so they finally scanned my stomach with ultrasound and found my gallbladder was full of stones. And they were like, oh, we got to put this out tomorrow. And yeah, as they took it out, it actually fell apart. I was pretty sick.
It fell apart.
Yeah, so I guess when they take the gallbladder out, they wrap it up in like a bag, and then they surgically remove it, and it falls into the bag so it doesn't empty into your torso. But as they cut my gallbladder fell apart.
Oh my goodness.
So it's like if I had been much longer, it would have fallen apart inside my body, and that would have been
Oh my
possibly
goodness.
deadly. That's it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And then what
Yeah.
happened after that with your health?
Well, after that, so I'll back up to my surgery a little bit more again because when they removed my gallbladder, they actually had to cut it off of my right kidney. So my gallbladder was trying to attach itself to my kidney, trying to survive. And then after that, I kept getting chronic kidney and urinary tract infections. And I was put on a consistent course of antibiotics for a year. And my digestive symptoms just kept getting worse. And they were like, well, your body has to adjust to not having a gallbladder. It'll take time, it'll come back.
Okay. And then when I met you, you were very, very strict low FODMAP, right? Almost eating, like you said, chicken and rice, no vegetables, very few, like no vegetables. And you were pretty good except once a month, right? You were having a little bit of an issue.
Yeah, it probably started that way, like once a month, and then really progressed to several times a week.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because when I first spoke with you, you told me some of these things, and I and so first of all, the gallbladder being removed, the frequent UTIs, which they say is related to your kidney issue.
Hmm.
However, I was thinking, okay, well, that's also a red flag. And so I said, right, this might be a sulfur issue.
Yes, you did.
So, and were you surprised by that, or had you ever noticed any issues with sulfur or sulfites?
I never did. I never heard of anything like that potentially being an issue. No one had ever mentioned that to me before.
Yeah, so it's an interesting case because, well, if you've researched and you know something about gut health, the low FODMAP diet is the easiest thing to find. A lot of people don't even know about it, but even people who are pretty well versed in gut health, you think of the low FODMAP diet for IBS, maybe you think of SIBO, but the when you have your
Oh.
gallbladder removed and you get chronic UTIs, that can be associated with a less common subtype of SIBO called hydrogen sulfide SIBO. And in that case, the low FODMAP diet would not fully do the trick because it still has some high sulfur foods that are allowed with it. And I think
Hmm.
that's where you were. So I had all these things pointing to that, but we went ahead and tested you. And what did we
Hmm.
find? We did a breath test and a stool test, and what did we find?
Right.
We found that your breath test, your lactulose breath test, was consistent with hydrogen sulfide SIBO, and
Hmm.
you did have the disulfovibrio bacteria in your stool. So those were two things kind of confirming what your symptoms pointed to. So then, before we started any sort of antimicrobials to rebalance your gut bacteria, we said, okay, well, let's do a dietary trial, right? I had you do 2 weeks on the low sulfur diet.
Yeah, you told me stop doing low FODMAP, which was very scary. Even though it wasn't fully working for me, I was very scared to start eating gluten and fruit and vegetables. But I ate it and I was fine.
Yeah, so when you told me I said we need to shift from low FODMAP to low sulfur. Let's
Yeah,
do kind of a 2 week trial. And then when I learned that you were nervous about it, because that's really common when you've been avoiding
yeah,
a food because you feel better when you do, or multiple foods, it's really scary to then start eating those foods. So you eased out of it. Yeah, you introduced gluten and certain vegetable, like you were on such a low fruit and vegetable diet, and you've really been able to add a lot more back in, right? We just had to keep the high sulfur vegetables low.
right. Yeah. Now, I mean, that was one of the things when I reached out to you in the beginning was I knew I wasn't getting all the nutrition that I should have. It didn't even occur to me, honestly, that I wouldn't have to be low FODMAP. It didn't occur to me that you could fix me. I I just wanted to eat better food and I didn't know how to do that because FODMAP wasn't working for me.
Yeah. And I remember, right, that you were meal prepping and having eggs once a week or once every couple weeks, right? And you were
Yes.
like, it's weird because my symptoms seem to crop up every week or 2 weeks, however long the rotation was. And we figured out that so eggs that are high in sulfur, but they're low in FODMAPs, you were having those every 2 weeks. And that's why mysteriously you were having symptoms every 2 weeks.
Right.
So, yeah. And what you said is really true. A lot of people don't grasp, they don't understand, and it's because I don't think it's presented well. I don't think it's, the low FODMAP diet is supposed to be temporary. It's supposed to be, but there's a few problems with that. First of all, it's not really obvious if you're just looking, you hear about the diet, you hear it's helpful, you look up the food list, that you shouldn't stay on it long term. The information is just not readily available, but long term it decreases your good bacteria diversity because the way the low FODMAP diet calms symptoms down is by not feeding the bacteria that's overgrown either in your small intestine or your large intestine. But by doing that, we're also starving the good guys. So long term, that's a problem because then we're not feeding the good bacteria, and the good bacteria protect you long term from other issues with less good bacteria. So that's a problem. Nutrient deficiencies can be a problem. Obviously, just general happiness and contentment with life and social situations and traveling can be a problem. And then the other thing is but the other reason a lot of people can't break free from that is because they're relying on it to control their symptoms, and they don't know that by finding their root cause, seeing what's out of balance in their gut and fixing that they can go then and reintroduce the foods and feel well. So you were able to do that right off the bat because you weren't even on the fully right diet to begin with to control your symptoms. So the next step then, well, can you tell me a little bit more? So basically what we did is we added in some different herbals and things to help rebalance the gut, really target the hydrogen sulfide producing organisms, support gut health, support digestion, support healing, start building your diet back out to get more diversity. So that's what we've been working on. And can you tell me what things are like now for you?
Oh, I had such a strange experience a few weeks ago, I think. I I just finished eating dinner with my husband and we were just sitting around and I realized I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel bad and I just realized I used to always feel bad. Every time I ate, no matter what I ate, I always felt bad. And so now I eat and I just go about my day and I don't have this heavy, just sick feeling all the time. I eat fruits and vegetables every day. I eat gluten and whole grain. I feel like I just have more energy. I like to exercise and my workouts are a lot easier. It's easier to do burpees and V-ups and stuff when your stomach's not bloated and uncomfortable. I don't have to worry about finding a bathroom. We went traveling in Europe for 2 weeks, and finding a bathroom there can be challenging at times. And that wasn't a problem for me at all. So the stress and worry that is off of me is amazing.
That was such a huge, I think it was such a symbolic kind of celebration too, right? That you were able to go on your trip just in the nick of time and not
Yeah.
have any issues, both with symptoms slowing you down
Mhm.
or even just having to follow, you weren't having to follow a strict diet anymore, which would have been so difficult.
Absolutely. That would have been very challenging. Every single day I was eating things that a few months before I never would have eaten.
Yeah. So that's definitely something to celebrate. And we did. We were so happy to talk about that. So, can you tell me, yeah, so that was a really good description of how you're feeling now. What were,
Hmm.
if any, some hesitations you had about working with a dietitian?
Well, I work in the healthcare field myself, so traditional medicine, you know. So was this fact-based, evidence-based? Was this a scam? Am I going to be taken? So those were my major hesitations. And then also, I think you probably really realized when we started working together, I was very guarded. I was very aware that this might not work. I was, for a long time into my treatment with you, I was just like waiting for it to stop working, waiting for me to go back to how I was. So part of the hesitation was probably being let down in the past, kind of working with other professionals and nothing coming of it.
Yeah, I think that's only natural and very common after years of trying one thing after another, after another, after another, after another, and after a while, you do stop getting your hopes up, right?
Yeah,
But you keep
yeah,
trying, but
absolutely.
you start to your hope kind of dwindles as the time goes on. So I know that's tough, but we yeah, so with functional nutrition, we just take a different approach, and we're not just looking at, okay, you have diarrhea, even so the standard medical approach is symptom related. So okay, you have diarrhea, here's a medicine for your diarrhea. Or even if they're thinking outside the box, well, it maybe there's an anxiety component, so we're going to treat your anxiety to help your diarrhea. But
Mm-hmm.
that's about as far as it goes for these functional issues. And your body is so complex, and all the different parts of your body are interconnected. So the functional nutrition or functional medicine approach is to look at the different parts of your body and rebalance and support what needs it to get you back to more normal functioning. Because even standard medicine from a dietitian perspective would still just say, let's eliminate the foods that are causing you trouble and balance your diet as much as we can within that framework. But with a functional approach, we're just looking at, we're trying to find root causes and solving those root causes as best as we can. So what? So anyway, thank you so much for recording this. This is I just your
Sure.
story is so helpful because you're in that category of people where, well, I think a lot of people with IBS and SIBO are in this category where they go undiagnosed for so many years without solutions for so many years. But then, especially in your case, it's the hydrogen sulfide SIBO. It's really, really difficult to catch, and so it goes overlooked even more so than regular the typical the other two types of SIBO. So I'm hoping that people listening to this, if they do have some of those red flag kind of hallmark symptoms of hydrogen sulfide, which again, well, the symptoms can be non-specific as far as kind of the GI symptoms that are typical with IBS, bloating, abdominal discomfort, I would say diarrhea is typically, although sometimes it can be constipation. And then usually with hydrogen sulfide, there's symptoms throughout the rest of the body, and it can be things like brain fog, fatigue. It can be like issues with muscle pain throughout the body. And the UTIs or bladder issues is a big hallmark symptom of the hydrogen sulfide. And then it's especially common in people who've had their gallbladder removed, because when your gallbladder's been removed, there's no regulation and concentration of the bile. And so it can create a bile rich environment that actually is a wonderful place for that hydrogen's. It's not a wonderful place, but it's a place that hydrogen sulfide producing bacteria like to grow in a
Mm-hmm.
bio-rich environment. So if anybody listening has any of those things going on, this is something to think about, and you can ask to be tested for hydrogen sulfide SIBO and take it from there. Or the other thing I would recommend is trying a low sulfur diet for a couple of weeks and seeing if that helps. Usually that's a really good test to kind of see if you're on the right track with your thinking. So, any last words of encouragement to anyone listening from you,
I'm
Beth?
sorry, I had a truck drive by. I couldn't hear
Oh,
you.
okay. Any lasting words of encouragement to anyone listening from you?
Oh, I would say, oh, I told you I was going to cry, Alyssa. I would say there's still hope out there. I think losing hope is one of the hardest things. I trust the process. It definitely wasn't fully easy the whole time. And just keep trying and trust Alyssa.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. And it's just been so great working with you. And I'm really glad that you stuck with it and that you trusted me, even though you really had no reason to trust anybody anymore. But we can't give up, right? We keep trying, and at least you did. And that's awesome. And I'm so glad that you're reaping the benefits. So we're going to keep going with your
Me too.
recovery. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing that.